Okay, we have the Rugby Championship right around the corner. First weekend kicks off next weekend. Really excited for this competition. I always think it's the best international competition with the exception of the World Cup and the Lions Tours. So yeah, for this first video where there's no weekend as a build-up, I'm going to make 3 bold predictions for this Rugby Championship. And by the end, we will review, and if I'm a moron, you'll find out. So, without further ado, let's get into it. 3 bold predictions for the Rugby Championship. First prediction right here. I'm going to say that New Zealand are going to win it. And there's many elements of this of why I think this is going to be New Zealand's tournament. I think South Africa, on paper, look like the better team. They're more aged, they're more experienced. But I think there's a couple of key things that will give New Zealand the edge. A change of coaching staff in terms of having Razor coming in, I think is going to freshen them up. Razor knows how to win games, and I think his style of rugby that he brought in with the Crusaders is going to have a lasting effect and impact for this New Zealand team. I think they'll be bruising with the forwards and flamboyant with the backs. The tight stuff that we saw in the England series, I think that's going to get sorted out. And I think they're really graced by the fact that they're not playing South Africa until 3 weeks into the tournament or 2 games into the tournament. So I think that's going to really benefit Razor to get more cohesion, know what his 15 is going into that first South Africa game. And I think that's going to be really crucial. Having those 2 games against Argentina, Australia, still great teams, a lot of rugby culture there. But let's be honest, lesser opponents than playing South Africa. I think that's going to have a huge impact in terms of getting those New Zealand boys ready to roll. I would be predicting that South Africa would win if New Zealand and South Africa were playing each other from week 1. South African players, the majority of them, or a lot of them, have obviously been playing in the URC. They've been playing in the Europe as well, in the European competition. So they have had about 2 or 3 weeks rest now, but they're not fresh. And the only advantage is that they've had that cohesion and playing together. And I think that only comes into it if New Zealand don't have those 2 games straight off the off, which means that they have a chance to warm up, get into their groove and rhythm, and find out who their best 15 is. And I think that's going to be a big difference. Speaking of best 15s, I think another reason and another prediction I'm going to be making is that South Africa don't know who their best fly half is at the moment. And the prediction that I'm going to be making off the back of this as the second prediction is that throughout this Rugby Championship, South Africa will start 3 different fly halves. That doesn't mean play, I mean start, as in that it's a bold prediction. I think there will be 3 different fly halves that will start. I'm not going to name them because that maybe puts me into a corner a little bit too much. But I think we're going to see Handré Pollard and Manny Libbok chopped and changed round. And I think maybe someone who's going to come in as a third option in there will come in and see some time. I think Pollard has looked a little bit out of sorts starting at that 10 shirt. And I think Manny Libbok is really interesting, really exciting. But in those games where it's massively physical and you get shut down, such as games against New Zealand where the breakdown's key, he's not always going to get the ball that he wants at the pace that he wants it to get South Africa going. And South Africa might want to play more kick away and defence ball. I just don't think that's the game for him. So with Pollard's, I don't want to say declining form, I feel like it's a bump in the road. I think he's going to come back to his best, hopefully when he comes back and plays for Leicester. But I feel like South Africa will be starting 3 fly halves throughout this Rugby Championship. At any one point, 3 fly halves, different fly halves, will get named in their starting 15. As my final prediction, to keep this short and sweet, I don't think Australia will finish last. Which, considering where we were with the World Cup, I think is a bit of a bold prediction. But I think if you were watching the Wales games, I think we saw a team that had very little time together. But I think just the vibes and the feeling of the team have changed. Of Joe Schmidt coming in, taking the job, having a bit of a new era in Australian Wallabies rugby. He's probably got the Lions tour next year, obviously, in his mind massively. He wants to build towards that. He wants to have a team that's going to be very competitive for that. I think there's a lot of talent in Australia, in Australian Rugby Union, that's not being fully utilised. I definitely see that with some of the players that we see playing in the Super Rugby. I think one of the main ones for me is Max Jorgensen, who plays fullback for New South Wales Waratahs. Liners, Son as well is also in the team. I don't know. There are some exciting players that are coming up and through. And I think Argentina, with the newly appointed head coach of Michael Contepomi, who is already gaining himself quite a decorated career in terms of coaching, I could see Argentina taking a step back. I know that Contepomi worked with Cheika under his leadership, but I really think Cheika is a great coach and manager to make a team do the basics right, and I think Argentina did that well. It's what saw them going into a World Cup semi-final that makes up for not a lack of talent, but a lack of identity. Maybe it makes up for, and I think they have some selection, not issues, but choices to make. I don't think they really know who their best 15 is at the moment either. Neither do Australia, but I think those 2 games against Wales makes a big difference in terms of their preparation. So yeah, that's my third prediction. I think Australia won't finish last. I'll be honest with you, with these predictions, I think there is a distinct possibility that all 3 of them are completely wrong. The ways that I think they could be wrong is that South Africa, man, do they have a habit of proving everybody wrong? And they really, really play well when the doubters doubt them. For example, I think when they are made as favourites and people believe there's no one better than them, I think that's when sometimes they're a bit more vulnerable to losing. But when they're in a situation like this where they lost against Ireland, in the first test, yes, they did look dominant against Ireland, but I don't know, I feel like we're maybe seeing a little bit of sea change in terms of South African rugby. I think one of my biggest concern here is that they're just an ageing team. They're getting a little bit older. As I said, once they are not favourites, which, to be honest with you, the bookies are probably having favourites for the tournament. I'm just going to double check that. Why can't I find them? I like when you type in who are the favourites and it automatically comes up with basically every betting site, which is, a bit questionable, but I don't know. I couldn't actually find any odds off the off. But regardless, I think maybe the bookies probably have them as favourites anyway. But I don't know. I feel like there's questions for South Africa, and sometimes when there's questions, that's when they perform the best. So I can also definitely see Handré Pollard finding some form. I think he's probably the fly half to take them through and win. If I was Rassie Erasmus, which I'm not, and I don't have the insight and knowledge that he does, I don't think many people do. But if I was him, I would be starting Handré Pollard in these first 2 games to try and get him back to some form for the New Zealand games. And then once those New Zealand games are through, and hopefully you've got Pollard with some form, maybe that's when you start bringing in Manny Libok to take on Australia and Argentina. I think he's probably a better fly half to play against them. Probably a bit more open, more mistakes to capitalise on in attack, and Libok could realistically have some great games against them. So I think that's likely. I feel like that's probably what will happen. Other things as well. The reason why I think New Zealand maybe don't win the Rugby Championship is the same reasons why I said they could win it. New coaching staff. I mean, I think there is excitement around Razor coming in at head coach. I think there's a reason to be. But at the same time, one of the things that I said in my videos for the games reviews for the New Zealand-England tests, one of the major things that I saw is that New Zealand just made mistakes that they don't usually make. And I'm talking about handling errors, basics, messing up lineouts. God, how many missing lineouts do they have in that second test? Maybe this is Scott Robinson coming up into the international and, things are a bit of a step up. I think I felt a similar way when Borthwick first took over from England, and that first game where he coached against Scotland and he tried club tactic rugby against Scotland to try and finish off the game, kicking for territory and giving the ball away constantly to Scotland. And when he did that, I think he had a wakening up to what international rugby is. I think Razor's probably had that with those 2 games against England, which is good for his career. It's against a side that's good, developing, lots of potential, but isn't probably the best in the world, competing with your France's, Ireland's and South Africa's. So this is different. It's going to be a step up. He's got 2 games against opposition that's probably similar to England's skill level. But yeah, it was just uncharacteristic what I saw in New Zealand against England. It just felt like they didn't look themselves. They weren't tight. They were making errors that you would never see New Zealand make. And it was a lot of reasons why England was still in those games to some extent. So that's why I don't think that prediction would happen. Australia not finishing last. again, the reason that this couldn't happen is I think, well, the only other team that would compete for that bottom spot would be Argentina. And I think Argentina, even though, as I said, they have a change of head coach, the coach that's coming in is still got continuity, from the last coaching staff. He was attack coach, Contepomi was, for Michael Cheika. So maybe they come straight off the firing blocks and they look great. And that would be the differences, really. But yeah, I'm really excited for this Rugby Championship. Great competition. Means I get up early in the morning, watch some rugby, get some videos out in the afternoon or the next day. So it's great. And I'm really looking forward to it. And, you know, hopefully you guys enjoy it wherever you're watching as well. So that's it for me. Keep it short and sweet and enjoy the rest of your weekend.